When we ride our motorcycles, how do we know when the bike is actually in neutral? With the neutral light, of course. Or do we? I personally haven't when it comes to this bike, and what seems like a simple replacement is actually the most complicated and the most expensive wire that I've found on this bike, but maybe it doesn't have to be. I want to address today what seems to be a fairly common issue with the CRFs here. Thankfully, it's nothing life or death. If anything, it's just mildly annoying. All right, as we come up to this stop, let me show you what I'm on about. Right now, I'm sitting at a stoplight and I'm in neutral, clearly because I don't have my hand on the clutch and the neutral light is on, perfectly fine. Ignore the fact that I need gas. However, it's when I go into first and click down, I'm in first gear right now. If I let off, it's gonna move forward, but it's still showing neutral. And if I push down on it, every time I push down and apply pressure, it goes away. When I lift off, it comes back. And now as I move forward, still in first, it's still showing neutral. Then I go into second. This time it didn't show it, but sometimes it will still show it in second gear. It'll flicker even. But now that we're cruising at an even higher gear, it's fine. The neutral light is not coming on. It's only when it's in first or sometimes second. So far I've just speculated why this is, and my best guess is that the switch is loose in some way, because it works, but the range, if you want to call it that, is just too wide going into first and second gear. So I figured it's best that I do some poking around in there, see what I can find, and see if I can fix it myself. So I haven't looked into anything at all, and the switch that I'm referring to is way down here, by the way, so we're going into this blind and basically doing exploratory surgery. One thing I do know is that there is oil behind this switch, and the reason why is that some people actually complain that this switch is leaking for them as well. So as a bonus, we can even kind of see the switch in more detail and maybe even try to find a fix for that kind of leak at the same time. But in either case, the first thing that we got to do under here is actually just drain the oil out. So as a bonus, I guess I'll be doing an oil change at the usual 600 mile mark. Usually I stretch these now to double, 1200 miles, but we're gonna start with dropping the oil. And for 600 mile oil, that looks brand spanking new. You can definitely stretch this thing to double. So now let's get in here a little closer. I've taken off the cover right here for the sprocket and the chain, and right down here is the switch itself. It's a bit of a squeeze to get in there, but it's only held in with one bolt of 5mm hex at the very bottom, and then you should be able to slide everything out. So this is what the switch looks like behind it. You got this little thing right here, an O-ring, and then basically just a sealed electronics section right here. Now, as far as leaking would go, I think the culprit would be this O-ring right here. Maybe it's pinched or worn down and allowing oil to seep through it. But another thing that might be the case is this piece right here, this plastic or epoxy, whatever material this happens to be. Maybe this is cracking as well and allowing some oil to get through there if you have a leak. Now mine does not have a leak. It's perfectly fine. If anything, it's just a little bit dirty on the outside, but otherwise good there. So if you have one that's leaking, those might be the two things to look at. And then there's the switch itself. It's right here with this arm and this little mini T-handle, and what happens is it rotates like this, and I imagine that on the inside it rotates to a certain point where it actually makes contact with the wires right here, which trips the light on the dashboard. And the little arm of that switch assembly fits into this slot that is attached to the transmission. And if I move the shift lever, it's in neutral right now. If I click down into first, you can see that it moves forward and going back into neutral, and then even up into second, you can see that it shifts its position. Now I've seen this switch and I understand how it works. My first thought is that this is just losing its sensitivity, and my hope is that the reason why it's losing that sensitivity is because maybe there's a difference in the widths between this arm and the slot that it goes into. So I took my calipers and measured this little arm to see how wide it is, and it's exactly 2mm. And so because I can't get my calipers all the way in there to see what the width of that slot is, it's way too deep for this thing. This is actually pretty wide. I got some feeler gauges right here, and I'm gonna stack these. So with these three, this stacked is 2.1mm. If this slides in, that means there's enough play, that 0.1mm, that this is moving in between where it shouldn't be. Yep, 2.1mm, that slides in almost perfectly. So we know that this is 2mm and the slot it goes into is 2.1mm. And that doesn't sound like a lot, 0.1mm, but maybe that's enough, and this is sensitive enough, I'm hoping anyway, that that is where the slop is coming into and giving me a false neutral light. I just need to gain a little bit of thickness on this arm right here, and I have an idea to do that, which may be dumb, unless it works. Yeah, so you just watched me apply heat shrink to the ends of the bar on the switch assembly. I know, this sounds like a really dumb idea. I fully admit that. This is probably dumb, but it's worth a shot, maybe? I just want to give it a try because first of all, this is basically a free fix. It's the cost of one piece of small heat shrink. And because if this doesn't work, the other option, I think, really is just replacing this whole unit right here. And you know how much this switch costs? $90. I'd much rather first just sacrifice a piece of heat shrink than chuck out 90 bucks for one little switch so I can get a green light on my dashboard that says when I'm in neutral. So I guess we'll get this thing lined up and shove it in there, see what happens. Well, it actually went in there, so I'm just gonna put this bolt in here to make sure that it stays in place. And then I think without actually turning on the bike and actually having it running, because of course there's no oil in it right now, we're just gonna turn on the ignition, the accessories, and see if that does anything if I shift it around from neutral to first to second. Let's see what we're working with here. So it's in neutral right now, so that light is supposed to be there. But now, here's the test. I'm gonna click it down into first. And it's the exact same. See, it's doing that flicker thing. Off, on, off, on, off, on. Well, I tried. Let's not kid ourselves. That hopeful miracle cure was really never going to be. And because it didn't work, I immediately pulled it out right away and did the thing that I was really hoping I could avoid and got one of these. Absolutely ridiculous price. Almost $100 with taxes and things to get this shipped to my door. But nevertheless, now that I have it, let me show you how to replace it. So in this particular replacement, it has been a few days. I put oil back in this bike and I've been riding it. So in this case, it had to fall down, but it will get back up again. I'm just putting it on its side here so that way the oil is drained to the opposite end and I can be able to open this up without having oil just spewing out of that switch. So rather than first pulling out the plug, I think I'm going to address the wiring because the wiring is a little wonky. It snakes around from the bottom here, of course, along the frame behind the oil plug and then up to this little junction here, and then I think it ends somewhere behind the frame right about here. So it's going to be a lot easier if I just get that all out of the way first. There's a reusable zip tie that the factory provides. Okay, this is admittedly a terrible angle, but this is literally the best I can show you where the actual switch is. Right there, that tiny little piece that you're seeing and that I will put my finger on right here, that is the switch. And thankfully, where I'm touching it right here is the trigger or the little plastic flap that you have to push and squeeze to pull it out. So I have my other finger underneath the other side of the frame. There it goes. Popped it out. Well, now that we got that out of the way, we just got to work our way down, and so we'll snake it behind the engine mount here, and then the next wrinkle in this is this little plastic clip that is down here. I'm pretty sure that we're actually going to have to break this thing off because it's one of those annoying plastic trim things. The design is such that you pinch it from behind, but the problem with that is you can't get from behind because the engine's in the way. It's just this bracket, which is literally right up against that. It is so tight that I can't even get my finger behind that thing. So I am just going to, I think, break that off or pry it off. We'll see what happens, but in either case, I'm not getting that plastic clip back. Doesn't matter though. No use to try to pinch that thing out. Let's just cut the damn thing out. Well, I got it out of the plastic clip, but that's just one part of it. I actually need to get this plastic clip out of here. Now I guess I'll just try to keep pecking at it. Oh, there we go. Good Lord, that sucked. Well, now that we got that annoying part out of the way, hopefully it'll go smoother. I don't know, we'll have to see about the reinstallation of the new stuff, but we're gonna remove this chain guard right here, get that all out of the way. So wire routing is actually a little tricky. There's this bracket with a guard, so that way it's not in the way of the clutch cable. It hooks down and then through. So hopefully this plug is small enough that it can wedge its way back there, but we'll grab it from the front end here and hopefully be able to feed it down and through. Okay, I actually found it's better to just depin these entirely and then you can fish it out from underneath. So much easier. So this is how the clip originally looks before you mess with anything. This little gray piece actually pops out. There's a little tab right here where you can get a pick and just pop it, and then that gives you access to the actual wires. And it's gonna be possible to show you this up close and in detail, but on the bottom section right there and there are two tabs for each of these two wires. So you push those down and at the same time apply pressure to the back of it, and then these two slide out really easily. You can do all of this with a dental pick. But then we can continue to pull everything out. It's just gonna be wedged behind this little bolt hole right here for the guard. So So we're just gonna pop that out, and then we can take that 5mm bolt out of there and just pull the whole thing out. Now for installation of the new piece, and with the installation, I wanna be a little bit more careful because I didn't care when I was pulling it out, but now that I have a brand new piece, I care about putting it in. So first thing I'm gonna do is actually get it positioned right. Now this does have a little Sharpie marker right here where this arm is supposed to go, right there. This is assuming, of course, that your bike is in neutral. And then I'm actually gonna take a little bit of the oil that I can see in there and just lube up the O-ring here just a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and slide this thing in here and just let it seat itself. And I can go ahead and put that bolt in place and tighten it down. Torque is just enough. Click. And because I had to D-pin to pull it out, I need to D-pin the new one. So I'm gonna be careful about it this time to put it back in. Now it should be a little easier to get this part back here. And before I do anything further, I'm gonna make sure that that is clipped in place. And hopefully, I never have to touch this clip ever again. And this part shouldn't be too bad. I mean, we have to put it behind the engine mount, no big deal, but now we have to orient this to get it aligned up in here and push it, and we have to kind of do it blindly. And I guess we'll just feel for where it is. Thankfully, it is connected somewhere fixed on the frame, so it's not gonna move around. If it was moving around, that would make this thing impossible to do without taking, at the very least, this engine mount out of the way. Oh, I think I got it. And after lots of fishing around, I think, if I push, yeah, it's clipped. Final step, we'll put that reusable zip tie back around these 4 wires. Whew, there we go. That is the most annoying wire. It's just plugging in 1 wire, honestly, but that is the most complicated wire I have ever found. Well, let's see if it works. We're in neutral, clearly. Neutral light is on, but now if I pull in the clutch and click down, it stays off. We are no longer in neutral. But now the question is, what happens when I shift into second? Will that have anything as well? Just a little flicker, but that's okay because it's going from first to second. It does pass neutral in the process, but no flickers after that. It's unfortunate though, there's no miracle cure or DIY fix for this stupid neutral switch. I was hoping that that was gonna be the case and I could fix it for free myself. And even after putting this one in, I poked around with the old one because I'm not gonna be using that anymore. Who cares if I break it open? And I found that it was pretty tough to get into, all the epoxy, and there's a metal clip around it. So if you're really willing to try to preciously open that thing up and get everything, whatever it is in there, tightened and then re-epoxied, resealed, it's just not worth it. So I guess it's kind of justified, more or less. But if I'm 100% honest and I didn't have this channel and not a video to produce to show you about the neutral light, I would have just stuck with the broken neutral light and just lived with it. I'd much rather just deal with it and actually know that I'm in neutral by feeling it when I click it up with my feeling in my foot and verifying by letting off the clutch slowly and seeing if it moves forward or not. It's not exactly 100% necessary to have a neutral light. It's just a nice to have, honestly. But in either case, thanks for at least watching through this video, and go ahead, if you haven't already, do the like, subscribe, comment thing so that hopefully I can get some of that money back for that $100 switch in the ad revenue for this video. That would be nice.
That would be nice. Won't feel like I'm rolling dice. If you subscribe and leave a like, I'll feel like I can't afford this bike. Seriously, $100 for a glorified light switch? Is it full of rubies in there?